A while since I did a anarchy video, so I figured I'll do one. The problems they don't explain how you undo are the obvious ones: the consolidation of wealth and control, and then exploitation. I mean, there's huge failures there, and the fact that government isn't fixing those problems perfectly only demonstrates that we've done the government thing badly. It doesn't demonstrate that it can't be fixed, or that you can't put control mechanisms in place that prevent consolidation and exploitation. We just haven't done it. But you know, there's just, I mean, you can just argue through so many scenarios and say, go ahead, create the board game. You know, let me see you do it, all right? Because it's just going to be, Monopoly is basically anarchy. You don't see the government when you play Monopoly. I mean, you pay the 10% tax, but otherwise, there's not too much government, okay? There's a little, you got to pay a little this here, a card there, but no big deal. You go to jail once in a while, big deal. Yeah, there's nothing to stop. Like, once you own the greens and the blues and the yellows and the reds, yeah, you're going to win the game, and you're eventually, everybody else is going to be out of the game. And I guess they should have, like, a monopoly, if you really could extend it into some game that would go on and on. You know, once you're deprived of all your money, then you go into, involuntary servitude. Then you start making contracts just to survive, and you'd be obligated, to pick peaches all day for a peach, so whatever. I don't want to get lost in that, but yeah, none of this, you can't explain how any of it would work. If you take a simple scenario like, water rights, it just isn't going to work. So anyway, the video I'll post a link to, he says some things about slavery and how that was the state. Well, of course, the state made slavery more efficient. The state makes a lot of things more efficient. Okay, so of course it made slavery more democratic. I mean, more socialist, let's say. The common man could own a slave because the state would secure your ownership. It would protect it. But it didn't. The state didn't create slavery. I mean, the rich plantations would have still been able to hire their own security and keep their own slaves, and they didn't have to have a state do it. It just that the state made it more efficient. And then he made some other comment about the Wild West or something, and made some sort of comparison about lower crime rates or something. It was just kind of silly. Because the Wild West was basically gangs. Very few people went west, young man kind of thing all by themselves. Okay, you went with a herd of people. Okay, you didn't go out there alone. So you were part of a gang. I mean, it's the whole Wyatt Earp kind of thing. The cowboys, the gangs, the clans, the whatever. So you belonged to some kind of thing that was going to protect you. I mean, if you were on your own in the Wild West, you were likely going to get yourself raped and pillaged pretty badly. And then what did happen? The land barons took over, right? I mean, it's it's the same scenario. So you had your anarchy, and what did they do? They bought up everything. And then you had these huge fights over land and who could graze what animals, and then you had people killing each other over streams and rivers. And what basically happened is the land barons, to really own their land, they had to own the whole watershed. And it was just an obscenity. It was monarchy all over again. You might as well have called these these things nations. You could have called them that, no problem. So it's just bullshit. Anarchy is not the answer. Fixing government is the answer. So, I mean, the big flaw in our government, the obvious one to me is the two-party system. That just ensures that special interests have power, and it just fucks the whole democratic process. We don't have a representative democracy. What we do is play this silly game among the states. And what we do for our federal representatives, they're basically state representatives, or they're regional representatives, but they're not ideological representatives. So they're always going to it's the same majority election just taking place in all these different pockets. So you're not seeing America for its diversity, because its diversity isn't segregated. So unless you segregated everybody in America in a geographic location, you're not going to see America in the United States Congress. And the same thing happens in state legislatures, because they still do this regional voting thing. We're still voting our geography, not our ideology. And it's a huge, giant, preposterous flaw in the system. The other flaw is it's these branches of government thing. Yes, the executive's always going to have to be a winner-take-all. So the governor or the president's always a winner-take-all election. Not much you can do about that. Certainly in the election process, if we had something like instant runoff voting, then a third-party candidate could certainly be viable at any time, okay? Because nobody would ever be in that quandary of being worried about voting for their guy and helping the evil get elected. When they were voting for a lesser evil, and they end up get evil elected because they voted their true conscience. So that's an easy fix for the executive election. But yeah, these branches are corrupted, because there's no point in having three branches of government if they're all going to be controlled by the same special interests in the same two-party system. So it just fucks the whole game. Because if we see it now, especially in the last decade or so, the corruption between the sides and the games they play, the trade-offs and the compromises. The courts have basically, they're now giving all the sovereigns immunity, and as a reward, the sovereigns are giving the courts immunity. And so they've all given themselves immunity. They can break the law. The court system is a farce. Just an absolute farce. Not only did they give themselves immunity from maliciously violating your constitutional rights, they've given themselves the right not to write decisions anymore. It's just, what the fuck? What's the point in having a court system if it doesn't have to be accountable? Not only can't sue them, you can't even force them to express their opinion or explain their opinion. It's just nonsense. There's just no point in having a court system that's that corrupt or that willing to be to function outside of any accountability. How can they be an accountability branch of government if they're not willing to be accountable? It's a joke. There's mechanisms you can put, there's ways you can construct government to do what it needs to do. And I'm sort of we can argue about these subtleties. I don't think, yes, there's certain things, there's a lot of policy I think would change right away if we had a real democracy. So if we had real representative Congress, there's a lot of shit that wouldn't be going on. It wouldn't be even on the table, because it wouldn't be special interests compromising what people really believe and want. So some stuff wouldn't even be on the agenda. Like the abortion crap or the drug laws. A lot of this stuff wouldn't exist if real minorities in our society had a voice in Congress. There's no pot smokers, nobody openly advocating in the United States Congress, yet there's millions of people in this country who smoke marijuana. So it's a farce, it's a joke. They have no political representation. It's nonsense. The same can be said for cigarette smokers, mountain climbers, roller skaters, whatever the minority interest is, they have shit for representation. And so, yeah, if you don't fix that, then this government sucks. It's a piece of shit. But anarchy is not the solution. It's a non-solution. Every problem that government exposes is a problem that would only be made worse under anarchy. The capacity, the corruption would be even more obscene. Anarchy is just the way, it's just the road to monarchy. We'll just pick whatever, if anarchy started tomorrow, well, then I would just look at the available value clans that existed, and I would say, well, those guys are pretty close to what I want, so I'd join that clan, and we just end up warring with the rest of you until we annihilated you. Anarchy will just have us, we might end up at some better place in the future, but we'd end up at that better place by just essentially annihilating all the diversity that gets in the way, all the troublemakers. We just kill each other until you have one race and one kind of people and one kind of values and one kind of everything. Because that's the only way anarchy could ever work. is that it has to be, we have to go back to some kind of familial order. And then we got the same thing anyway. Then we still got a tribal king or something. We still got some lordy jackass that'll be telling us what to do. So it just doesn't go anywhere. And it's just way too high a price to pay. The lost productivity. I mean, you could just think of it in so many different ways. Like I said, all the fights over water rights, over who's polluting whose land, over who's taking too much. You know, we're not going to watch somebody, you know. We're not, you know, if somebody else across the street was, you know, had a work camp for 10-year-olds, you're not just going to sit back and let it happen. No, you're probably going to go to war with the bastards. There's just so many things that wouldn't be tolerated. You know, if you got a really nice place that you've set up and some asshole decides to buy a piece of property next to you and open a pig farm or something, no, you're going to kill the fucker. You know, you're not going to let him destroy your life, your livelihood. And well, anyway, just no practical way for it to work. It's just a pipe dream, and it's all based on this anti-government nonsense. Yeah, parts of government suck. Let's fix government.